Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome an award-winning travel expert who has explored 102 countries on 6 continents. Wow. She's the host of her own podcast, Make Your Own Magic. She's a highly ranked travel influencer. Her YouTube channel has garnered millions of views, and author of the fascinating memoir, Bravish, One Breakup, 6 Continents, and Feeling Fearless After 50. Please help me welcome Lisa Niver. Lisa, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you, and I'm so excited that Amy introduced us. That was so kind of her.
Yes, no, very nice of her, very extremely nice. No, I was looking forward to this. So you're very fascinating. So you have a lot to cover, but let's start by going back. Where did you grow up exactly?
I grew up in Los Angeles at Stephen Wise Temple, and my family moved around a lot. My parents met in New Jersey at Rutgers and Douglas, and after the Army, we moved out to California.
You grew up, were you like a religious family at all, or just, what was your Jewish upbringing, I guess?
We grew up in a Reformed temple, but very observant. We followed all the holidays, and I went to religious school and had a bat mitzvah, and I went to Israel a bunch of times. I studied in Israel in college at Hebrew University.
Oh, right. I did read that. We'll discuss that as well. So as a kid, I traveled a lot. Nothing compared to what I was reading about you. So your family traveled to a lot of places. So why just vacations? What was that?
Well, I always tell people my dad would rather ski than breathe. And he said that's not true. He'd rather breathe. But we grew up going skiing a lot. And at the time, growing up, we went on a family cruise to the Mediterranean. My dad was taking a seminar in the morning, and then we go out and explore. And that cruise really changed my whole perspective. Up until that time, I really thought that social studies or history or whatever we called it then was very boring. And there we were, and we got off one day and we walked through the Parthenon. We went on a camel ride near the pyramids. Wow. It was the first time I was ever in Jerusalem, and I went to the Western Wall, and I felt like I was walking inside the history books. And when I got home, all I could think was, how do teachers make this boring?
I'm going to say a couple of things. Like I said, we went around a lot. I used to say that, my dad informed on the mob. I told friends that, so we had to run always. But my father was a history teacher, so I'll have to ignore that part of it. So
I'm sure he's good at it. But
he was he passed away. But yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, but that one of the things I taught school for many years, and one of the things that's fascinating to me is we really aren't that nice to teachers, sadly, but it can make such a difference. Like, I have students come up to me that I taught 20 years ago, and they're like, I still remember that day when we did that experiment in science class.
Well, going back, so you went to university in Jerusalem. Why?
For the semester.
For the semester. So what led you to go there, and what was that experience like for you?
So what happened was, I told you we were on this cruise as a family, and I had that day in Israel. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to temple, and Rabbi Zeldin was always talking about Israel and always going to Israel. And I went as part of LA Ulpan when I was 15. We were the largest Ulpan from Los Angeles, I think, ever. I think we were 90 kids. We had 4 or 5 buses. We were there for 6 weeks. It was amazing. It was like summer camp on steroids. It was so much fun. And we were studying Hebrew and going on field trips. And at the end of that trip, I was like, how can I come back here? So I went to college in Philadelphia. I went to Penn, and I went for a semester abroad, and I studied in Jerusalem. And I mean, what an amazing experience. I took a class where we took a field trip every week. I'm like, this is a class? This is amazing.
We have shared a lot of those things. I mean, I lived in Israel as a kid for a couple of years also. So it was it was really interesting. Like you said, it's like every week was history. Another, no matter where you went. So
where did you guys live in Israel?
I lived in Jerusalem also.
Oh, you did?
In Gilo. So it was
So an amazing thing for people that maybe have never been to Israel. One of the things I thought was so incredible was we would be on these trips and they were talking about how hard it was to do construction, especially in Jerusalem, because you'd go to dig up and you're like, we want to have a parking lot. Like, oh, okay, well, we found more of the second temple.
Yes.
Now it's an archaeological site.
Exactly right. I heard that same thing with there. So I was looking at your career, and it's all over the place. So which we'll discuss also. But you were a science specialist, which you alluded to before. You're teaching. So working in a school, the next thing I see, you're an assistant cruise director, which of course is the next logical progression after science teacher. So how did that all come about?
So, okay, let's back up a bit. So at Penn, I was pre-med and I spent a semester in Israel. And I actually did go to medical school in San Francisco. I went to UCSF and I made the decision that I did not want to be a doctor. And I went on leave and I learned to scuba dive.
Okay.
So what happened was I was trying to decide. I was working at Planned Parenthood and I was teaching school and I loved scuba diving. And I was trying to think, what should I do with my life? I was on leave. So I was like, should I go back and be a doctor? I really liked teaching. I loved summer camp and I was crazy about scuba diving. So I left medical school. I became a full-time, part-time assistant teacher. I made no money and I couldn't afford to scuba dive, which was my new goal. So I was racking my brain. What could I do? And somehow I convinced myself that I was going to work for Club Med, which I made happen. So I went to work for Club Med, of course, because the universe is the universe, through a variety of things, which the stories in my book, like you mentioned, I have a book, Bravish. But anyway, through a variety of mistakes, I was on a terrible scuba diving adventure. I was super seasick, and I took the job at Club Med in the mountains in Colorado to go skiing. So I went skiing for a season. I packed up all my belongings in San Francisco and I was like, I'll be gone 3 months and I will be back. When I opened those very dust-covered boxes, it was 7 years later.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I worked for Club Med for a full year and then I switched to cruise ships because of my desire to scuba dive and get paid. I got paid and then on my off time, I would scuba dive, which I thought was pretty impressive. And that's how I ended up. I first was a teacher when I worked on cruise ships. And then I figured out that the cruise staff made more money, worked less hours, and had bigger cabins. So I was like, I will have that job.
How was that? Did you enjoy that?
There were moments working both for Club Med and cruise ships. You work every single day. It's a 7-day-a-week job. But when you're not working, you're very free. Like I ate in the restaurant. I had a cabin steward. I never went to the supermarket. I never went to the dry cleaner. I never went shopping of any kind. I had whatever clothes I had with me. So you were either working or you were in complete fun mode. So I describe it. It's like living in a college dorm, but no one has homework.
Is it like Love Boat at all or no? Is it?
Well, my first company, I worked for Princess multiple times, and Princess Cruises is the Love Boat.
Right.
So is it like that? Yes. As you set sail, you can hear the theme of the Love Boat.
Right.
And for me, having come from Club Med to cruise ships, at Club Med, everybody does everything. I was in the show, you eat dinner with the guests. So on the ship, for me, it was almost a vacation. I had a lot more free time. And so I started helping in other departments, which the unforeseen consequence of being really nice was that everybody was so shocked. I got lots of special things. Like I helped the shore excursion department. This is so long ago that they actually printed physical tickets and you had to tear them and cut stickers. So I would sit. I was a preschool teacher. I worked for Club Med. I showed up on the ship and I was like, please put me to work. So I used to sit on the first night of the cruise and cut the stickers into sets of 5. It was not hard work and there were drinks. So we'd spend an hour hanging out and they're like, oh, we really appreciate you. Would you like to go on the dog sledding tour in Alaska? I'm like, okay. Would you like to go on the helicopter to the glaciers? Sure. So other people would say to me, why do you get to go? And I said, well, Do you help them? I said, no, why would I help them? I'm like, that's why you don't get to go.
Good point. Yes. So I saw you went back into teaching, but where did the first start thinking about possibly doing travel writing as a career?
So that's a really good question. You have great questions. So what happened was I was teaching, I was traveling, I was teaching, I was traveling. So one time when I came back and I was teaching at Curtis School, which is actually where I went to elementary school, I became a teacher at school and I taught my friends' kids, which was such a, it feels like very Jewish and life cycle-y that, how the world turns. Anyway, so I had been teaching there almost 3 full years. And I was going on an adventure with my then boyfriend. And at that school, I taught multiple grade levels. So the children had the idea they would have a new classroom teacher, but I'd still be the science teacher. And I was leaving and they were not happy. So I promised I would send a newsletter. I would send pictures and information. And I didn't know that any of them would care, but I was very diligent to make my newsletters and send them. When I came back from that trip, that was 2008, 2009, which you might remember was a terrible financial crisis time.
A lot about that off here, but yes.
We didn't talk about it, but one of the reasons I left cruising was because of 9/11. My company went bankrupt. So there's a lot of my life changes were about major economic events, world events. But anyway, so I left teaching, I left the ships to go back to teaching, I left teaching. Anyway, we came back. And it was also, besides the whole real estate bubble, was the blogging revolution had started. So when I came back from being away for the year, I made a blog on Blogger, which was part of the Gmail suite at the time. It still is. But I picked Blogger because it's so laughable now that this was actually in my brain, but it completely was one of my reasons that I picked them was I didn't need another password. Like at this point, can you imagine using that as a way to pick? Like we have 9 million passwords. Who cares? But it was free. I always recommend to people. I have a travel writing class now on Udemy, and one of my big things is if you want to get started, start for free because you might not like it.
Right.
Start for free. So Blogger was free and no password. So all of those newsletters were the basis of the website, and so I had content. And then I started writing for other people. My partner at the time, when we were gone on this adventure, had the idea that maybe we would write a book. And so I was reading about books and you needed a website. So it all kind of came together that I had the newsletters, the blogging revolution happened. We were trying to figure out how to promote something. And the website took on this whole life of its own.
Really? Started getting traffic right away?
Oh, no, I did not right away, but I was diligent. I committed to writing once a week. I gave myself homework. I was teaching. So I was like, here's my students' homework. Here's my homework. And I didn't have traffic right away, but I fell in with this really lovely group, Meet Plan Go, which was a project of people doing long-term career breaks. And so I hosted the Los Angeles Meet Plan Go, and I met other people that were much more involved with writing and blogging. And they were so kind to me. This one man, Dave, who runs Dave's Travel Corner, he had already been writing for many, many years. And Twitter at the time was new. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about projects and embedding and WordPress. I mean, it was like a foreign language. Anyway, so we had an email interchange after we met where he recommended something. And I wrote him back and I was like, it's a really good idea. And in 5 years, when I figure out what any of the words in your sentence mean, I'm going to do it. And he wrote me back and he's like, here's the code. Just put this in this place. And I was like, oh my God. I don't know if I can do even that, but I'll try. And so I was so lucky early on that people were so generous with their time and their knowledge. And I've really tried to do that for other people coming up because it is so confusing in the beginning. People are like, oh, just take the iframe code from YouTube and put it in the HTML and the Elementor of WordPress. And I'm like, what? Now I know what that means. But at the time I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Is that all? Yeah. So I'm going to get back to the travel, of course, but one of the things you worked at Nickelodeon as a
Yes.
teacher. Okay, so
Yes.
I have to ask about that. How did that happen? What was it like working at Nickelodeon, and what were your responsibilities as you were a studio teacher, right? So, what were your responsibilities there?
So wow, you really investigated me. I love this interview. So the funny thing about me working, so a set teacher, people sometimes get confused. They think that I was on camera as a teacher. So when children are in television and film, they must still go to school.
Right.
So a set teacher teaches the actors. So the funny thing about how did I get involved in set teaching? Literally because of Temple. So I told you that I like to be of service. When I worked on the cruise ship, I helped the photographers, I helped the shore excursion team. I was always helping. So at my temple, one of the things my mom helped with was the oneg after Shabbat. We would go early and help set it up. And we were working with this woman, Linda, and she said to me, Lisa, I know you're a teacher and I know you're going away. And I'm just wondering, what are you going to do when you get back? I was like, wow, that is a big question that I can't answer. She said, well, I'd really like to invite you to join me for a workshop. And she has been a studio teacher for decades and she knew everyone. And I was like, okay. She's like, here's what you're going to do. Here's the email, write to this person, sign up, go to this workshop. I'm like, I am leaving town in like 96 hours. She's like, it's okay. You have enough time to do it. I was like, oh my God, okay. I just have to pack up my whole condo, deal with the renter. Perfect. So thank God I did it. I went to the workshop. I did everything she said. I took the test. So when I came back, and I came back from traveling a different time alone, and I was getting divorced, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Linda was like, hey, she saw me at Shabbat, and she's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. And she said, why don't you come shadow me on set Monday? I was like, well, I don't have anything better to do than cry. So that's better than crying by myself. I'll cry at work. So I went with her. And to me, being on set is like the best combination of summer camp and
Mhm.
Club Med. It's a family. It's a unit. And I loved it. And the kids were like, will you be our teacher? I'm like, okay.
Sure.
So I worked, some of your listeners might remember there was a show called Bella and the Bulldogs that was at Nickelodeon. And Breck Bassinger was the lead star of that. And now she's a much more accomplished star because 10 years later, and she's been in everything. She was Star Girl on the CW. And I loved being a set teacher. It's not the most fulfilling teaching because you're not writing lessons, but I loved being on set. And for me, it was kind of a production internship. I was always learning something. The hardest thing for me on set is there always says, stay in your lane. You're not, no, don't help with that. This is a union job. That's someone else's job.
I do another podcast as well with a former child star, and so I've heard many of these stories, like about the set teachers and the set, that they had to get pulled out to go to class or something, certain things. So yeah, so famously or infamously, I guess there was a documentary recently about Nickelodeon. So earlier from the former child star. So what was your experience like? I mean, do you see anything? Everything was kosher, I guess. Let's say on your set.
So I apparently need to put something else on my watch list. I'm not familiar with the documentary. I
Okay.
will tell you that for me, being a studio teacher after having worked in public and private school for a long time,
Yeah.
I was aware that some of the rules, because the set teacher is licensed as, you must be licensed as a teacher, and also you're licensed with the labor board in California. And sometimes when I would read the rules or what we're supposed to do, I felt like a lot of the rules must have been created in response to that something didn't go right.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And so I was aware of that. And having worked for years on cruise ships and taking drills twice a week in case of an actual emergency, I just could have had the feeling that there were a lot of things that went badly. The way you had to be, who had to be where when kids were in wardrobe, and kids have, obviously they have a parent on set. In case anybody's wondering, they have a parent, they have a teacher. I worked in Canada a couple summers ago, and they have a slightly different setup with the assistant directors. They had an assistant director just for the crew, which I thought was interesting for watching over the kids. And we're always keeping track of how many hours did they work? When was their last break? Where are they? So I feel that in the time that I've been working on set, the children are very cared for, and there's special laws about the money, that nobody's parents should steal their money and nobody should harm them. We had special effects once on set, and they're like, we're going to do it for you alone. We're going to show it to you. Is it okay? We're going to show the kid. Is that kid okay? Like, this is how we're going to make it safe for everybody. I'm like, okay.
You eventually became a TV host yourself. I mean, so again, your career just took some amazing arcs. So how did it come about where you were put in front of the camera to host a show? And really, were there any nerves at that time? Because being a host, you're kind of the spokesperson for the company or the brand. So what was it like for you? And were you nervous about it, I guess?
So one of the things that happened, one of the very first times, or the first time I was on KTLA, I was actually on KTLA in my classroom at Browerman Elementary School, which is part of Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles. And Wilshire Boulevard Temple has the summer camp, was my first Jewish summer camp. So it was like this whole great collaboration of all. I felt like I was on that Sesame Street or Electric Company show, This Is Your Life. I was like, I went to summer camp here. Now I'm a teacher. Now I'm on TV. Now I'm on KTLA. And they had, in all the years of the show, they had never had a teacher on. And the woman that found me to be on the show, she's like, my mom is a teacher. How have we never had a teacher? And I had the best time. They were following me around all day in my classroom, and the kids, all the parents, of course, I'd signed to be on TV. And, it was a big discussion. Was it okay with the school to be highlighted on KTLA, which of course is the largest morning program in Los Angeles, is bigger than all the other, it's our local LA station. And it was so much fun. And I was like, how can I do more of this? And at the time, I had just started, I think at that point, my YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And my dad loves to tell the story that when I first started my YouTube channel, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have 100 views. It's so exciting. And then, we have this thing, Shabbat News, like what good has happened. And so 1 week it's like, oh my gosh, I have 1,000 views. So recently when my book came out a year ago, but when my book came out around the same time, I hit 2 million views. Wow. And I was pretty excited. And my dad told the story. He's like, oh my gosh, do you think Lisa's excited about 2 million views? You should have seen her when she had 100. Boy, was she excited. So because I'm a career teacher and I love education, when I was starting to think about doing more travel segments for KTLA and other programs, I actually worked quite a while with a coach. I asked some of my travel writing friends who did a lot of video and who was good at video. And through a series of discussions, I had a long call with someone, and she said, what would help you? And I said, well, I think that someone has to teach me how to do this. I need a coach. And she said, would you like to have a call with my coach? And I was like, that's really very nice. Yes, thank you. So I met with her, and we used to have a meeting like once a week. And then I actually took her on a press trip with me. She was my +1. She went on a cruise with me. Fathom Cruise Lines was part of Carnival at the time. They are no longer, not my fault. And, she sailed with me, and she said, listen, your thing is that you're out and about. I need to be out with you and give you tips. But the funniest conversation she and I ever had is when we were doing all the training sessions, she wanted me to explain something. And she said, it's so odd to me. Why are you good at this? She said, most of the time I have to train people not to turn around away from the camera. She said, you never do that. I said, well, maybe no one else you've worked with taught in public school. I taught 8th grade in Culver City. I taught physics and chemistry. I had 36 kids. And trust me, I did not turn around.
We have a lot of, I was a teacher for many years as well. So it's,
what'd you teach?
Social studies and English. So.
Oh, like from your dad. Yeah. The history
pretty much. I love history. So that's always been one of my things, that I'm fascinated by history, watch a ton of documentaries. So that's why I like, every time I go to a place, I go sightseeing. I don't like going to the beaches or something. I like going to see history. What happened here at this place? So very fascinated by that. So that's one of the things I admire that you get to do all the time. So let's talk about you.
You
Let's
have
talk
to
about the
come
book.
with me.
Absolutely, absolutely. But let's talk about the book here. So it's an award-winning memoir. Again, it's called Bravish. It hit home for me so many respects. So I had a chance to go through it. It's fascinating, infuriating in parts. Nothing, yeah,
Thank
and
you. Thank
very inspirational. So I highly recommend for everyone to get it. So let's start at the beginning. You were on a vacation in Thailand with your then husband when
Yes.
he basically snapped and assaulted you. So had you seen that coming at all? I mean, I read that there were problems, but what was going through your mind then? Because the intent was that you were going to be there for traveling for a long time. And so how did this all come about?
Yes. So unfortunately, my ex definitely had an anger problem. He definitely drank a lot. And that was, I'd say, one of the worst things that ever happened in our relationship. And what was different about that was that it was during the day, it was outside, there were witnesses, and he was not drunk. So there'd been a lot of excuses. I had accepted a lot of
That's the part.
shitty.
Just really, that just in public, just assaulted you, and like nothing. I was flabbergasted watching it. Yeah, reading it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I know that it's very triggering for people, and it's interesting. The people that know me was someone that I met traveling on a press trip, read my book, and she had known me for some time before the book came out and before she read it. And one of the things about me, I'm divorced now almost 10 years. Many of the people that met me since I'm divorced don't know I was ever married. It wasn't something I ever talked about once I was divorced until I wrote this book. And people were like, "You were married?" It's like, yeah, that happened. And so she was right. She wrote a really achingly beautiful review of my book. But one of the things she wrote about is like, I was trying in my mind to reconcile who you are and what happened to you. She was like, it was really hard for me to read. And I was like, it wasn't so good to live actually either. But I one of the things that happened was things were not good in Los Angeles in our marriage. And I made the decision that if we were on the road, it would be better. That the complaints were relative to working and city life. Unfortunately, I misunderstood the problem. And once there was no work and commute and traffic, the only thing left to not like was me. And so that ramped up to I mean, not to be too flip about it, but it ramped up to be quite unacceptable. But one of the problems for me, and this is also a big theme in my book, being Jewish and how wanting to return to synagogue is one of the things that really saved me. But another theme in my book is that I grew up with a problem with my eyes that was, in all fairness, quite significant, but I didn't know. And so I went about in the world as if I was fine. And only when I was in therapy during my divorce and spent lots of time retraining my eyes, did we realize not only do I not see like other people, I am sometimes in relation to other people blinded, blindsided to certain issues. And so I was like, we can fix this. We'll go on the road. And then we were on the road and I was like, I wasn't totally aware how bad it was. I wasn't stringing the pattern together, which many people don't, but it was definitely made quite a bit worse by my ability to, I don't want to say I didn't see it, but once I had a conversation once in therapy. I had a conversation once in therapy and she was like, did you not see the red flags? And I was like, yes, I thought it was a parade.
Well, yeah.
It's not good.
No,
It's just,
like I said, the book it made me feel for you so much.
thank
But
you.
it was
Thank you.
but it was just you get angry, like who is this person that just all of a sudden did this. And so, but how terrifying was it for you to be in another country alone at that point?
Yes. Yes. That is a good point. It was horrifying. Was not just that I was lying on the ground and was I like, is my neck broken? Is my arm broken? Am I okay? I do genuinely feel that I'm very fortunate to have guardian angels. I for sure the way I fell, I could have fallen differently. That could have been my last day. I'm not unaware of the danger that I was in. I wasn't always aware how dangerous it was. But when we were there on the street corner in Chiang Rai, this tiny town far from Chiang Mai, which in fairness is not so big either,
Mhm.
in Thailand, I saw someone watching us and I was thinking, I'm in Thailand, and if the police come, I don't know who they will take.
Right.
Like I carry an American passport and I feel very fortunate to be able to be out in the world with an American passport, which allows me to travel quite freely as a woman. Um, but I was like, I'm in a small town in a different country that doesn't have the same sense of gender and independence that we do here in America and in the United States. And I felt very afraid and um very shocked. It was a terrible time. I at the time Skype was really the form of communication. I think in this COVID Zoom time, I don't even know if people remember Skype, but Skype, I literally got on Skype, and as the day went by and as the time zones progressed, I was calling people. I called my friends in China. They were almost the same time zone. I called my friend in California, and I spent a most of, I think, 24 hours on the phone trying to just be hysterical, trying to figure out like, what am I going to do now?
Well, you said it, yeah, because I would have been, as a guy, I would have been terrified of being alone in this place there too, because I've read Thailand, great things in Thailand, but I've also read some not so great things in Thailand. So it was extremely fun. Was there a part of you also that was just concerned, like terrified that it it might lead to something more severe later on with him, like in the
Um, in fairness, I was in shock. And my friends, most of the concern was that I was alone in another country on another continent and how to get me back.
right,
And so the earliest concern was, could I stay alone? The answer was no. And how to get me home, and that was it. Like it was a small one step at a time, small steps to. And so when I was home, a friend of mine that I've known since I met him when I was in high school on
mhm,
LA Ulpan. We've been friends since we were 15. He's an attorney, and one of his first questions was, do you want me to help you get a restraining order? And I was like,
right,
I mean, there's an ocean. So there were a lot of things that I went through. I had a lot of, I'm, as I've mentioned, Los Angeles. So I had a lot of kinds of therapy. There's every kind of therapy in Los Angeles. Some I had never heard of. I did everything. But one of the things that helped me the most was I met with Rabbi Hersher at Stephen Wise Temple. We had a lot of meetings, and he was very grounding and helpful. We talked about when I decided I was getting divorced. We talked about all the Jewish parts of divorce. We talked about getting a get, which I did get. For people that don't know, that's a Jewish divorce. And then I went to the mikveh.
well, one of the things, and here's another thing that got to me in your book. You left Thailand to go back to the States. You had already quit your job. You talked about that feeling of being close to 50 and having to start all over. So you mentioned feeling like a failure, which I understood the thought process, but even though it's kind of harsh, for all the things that you were going through, I can understand, and relate to something like that, and creeping into your mind. So how terrified were you at that point, and how did you start to come out of it after?
So there was a lot of crying. I felt like all I did was cry, but it was interesting actually working on the book. Looking back, I was upset. I was crying. I was going through to every kind of therapy, like I mentioned, but I never really stopped working. I really struggled to figure out what to do next. So we've talked about one of the first things I did was I worked with Nickelodeon. And on the same day, I got a job at Nickelodeon. I also started writing for USA Today 10 Best. And I just kept going. And it was really hard. I was aware that things were awful, but I had two jobs, two great jobs that people were like, how'd you get one of those jobs? And I was like, I don't know, but I have both of them. And I'll try and figure out what I'm going to do.
Well, because you said it's just so casually. Yeah, I started working at USA Today. I started doing right.
It was so random though. Like, again, I just, part of the thing that's fascinating about, like I didn't put together all the things that were awful, but one of the other things that's given me, I don't know, that's a superpower, but I'll apply for anything. When I was looking for an agent for my book and looking for a developmental editor different times or trying to publish an article, I just started writing for both booking.com and Reader's Digest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like, what could the worst thing be? They'll say no. So with USA Today 10 Best, I saw that someone I knew wrote for them in a different city. And I was researching how do you write for USA Today 10 Best? And it said, we are looking for writers in these cities. And Los Angeles was one of the cities. So I messaged them like, hey, I'm from Los Angeles. I've been traveling around the world, but I'm back home. And here's some clips. At the time, the Huffington Post was really different at the time. I had a lot of articles for the Huffington Post. I'm like, I've been writing for them. I don't know, maybe I had a couple dozen articles. And they're like, I don't know. They wrote me back right away. We'd love for you to write for us. And I was like, thanks. And so everything kept going. So the funny thing about the book, and you said I was getting ready to turn 50, my eye doctor, we were working through my very severe challenges. And there's a funny story in the book about me having a call with Dr. Brodney, who's amazing, and my test results. So my test results were, I had like 0, 3%, 8%, 37, something like that. So I called Dr. Brodney. I'm like, hey, Dr. Brodney, I just have a question. He said, what's up, Lisa? I said, is 0 a good score on the test? And he said so kindly, well, Lisa, all the tests you've taken in your life, 100 has been a good score, right? I said, yes, but it doesn't make sense that 100 could be a good score because my scores are so bad. He said, well, yes, they aren't what we'd hope for someone but we can help you. We're just trying to see where you're at now, and we're going to help you get better. And I was like, so my scores are really bad. And he said, well, Lisa, when I look at your scores, I'm just happy you can read.
Oh.
I was like, wait, was I supposed to be on the little bus to school? Like, what are you talking about? So as I got better, one of Dr. Brodney's suggestions was I should have tennis lessons. And I was like, tennis lessons? I can't even play tetherball. The kids mocked me. Like, who can't play tetherball? So I played tennis, and then we kept talking about, Dr. Brodney was very supportive about, you've gotten better, and now you have to take your new skills and try them out. You need to challenge yourself. And I was like, I am not interested in your idea at all. No, thank you. And then I was on a press trip in Texas, and I met this woman who did 40 things before she turned 40. And that particular trip was all women. It was called the Girls Weekend in Grapevine, Texas. So the whole trip, every time we did something, her name's Tammy Lee. Tammy like, oh, I'm going to use this for my 40 things before I'm 40. And I was like, oh, that's so great. I love that idea. I wish I could do that idea. And this was like an ongoing, it was like a chorus. And everyone would be like, oh, you can do it. Why don't you do it? And finally, after like 2 or 3 days, Kelly looks at me and she says, Lisa, can you not do 40 things before you're 40 because you're older than 40? I was like, shh, nobody knows how old I am. She said, well, why don't you do 50 before 50? And I looked at her and I said, why don't you do 60 before 60? She goes, I'm not doing that. I'm like, neither am I. So that's how it started. I did 50 things before I turned 50 to reinvent myself. And one of the things I recognized writing the book was basically every single challenge I did, I said, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm too scared. It's too hard. I'm afraid it's not good enough. I won't do it. I won't make it. But I don't know. I had 8 million excuses. Eventually, again, lots of support, therapy, friends, family. I did them all. In fact, I really did 80 challenges.
Wow. Wow.
And it really restarted my brain. It restarted my life. It changed my career. It made this very nice book.
Mhm.
So it's, you have to, I always tell people small steps lead to big changes.
Well, Carrie, so here you are, someone who loves to travel, who's made a life out of traveling, and now while traveling, a major traumatic experience happened to you. So how difficult was that mentally to overcome and want to do it again?
Wow. I mean, do you have to send me a bill for therapy after this interview? You're very good. So how hard was it? Really hard. It was really hard. I remember being on a trip in Italy. I remember being on a trip in Vanuatu and crying every night. I remember being on a trip. I got hired to be a co-host for an Orbits web series in Puerto Rico. It was one of the first things I did after I left Thailand, a real trip. And during the day, I was hosting, we were interviewing. It was go, 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 go all day long. We'd have dinner, we'd go back to the room, and I would cry for like 2 hours. And I was like, the next day, I'd be like, can anybody tell? And it was on that trip that I figured out like I was definitely getting divorced. I was going back to my name. We had a big argument about it. Anyway, I cried in Vanuatu. I cried everywhere. So, and at some point, I'm on a trip in Italy. We go on the gondola ride. It's beautiful. We're in Venice, Italy. I'm having the best time. It's supposed to be romantic. And I'm on a gondola with these 2 or 3 new girlfriends that I made from the trip, other journalists. We get off the gondola. I'm like, oh, this is such a great day. We're walking back to the hotel, and someone comes running out of the hotel from our group, like, oh my God. Another woman in our group, she's like, oh, she's really upset. She's crying. And she was going through a divorce, or she hadn't decided to get divorced yet, but her marriage was falling apart. And we took her to drinks and we hung out all night, and we were like supporting her, and we were there for her. And we got back to the hotel, and I went to my room and I thought, wait, I wasn't the one crying. I'm getting better. And that was like a really big moment for me. I'm like, I'm on a trip and I'm not upset. So yeah, it was really hard.
Well, on that same vein, like, what made you decide to write your memoir? And
Ugh.
was it difficult to do so? Because after all you experienced, was it difficult or was it cathartic more?
I have never quit something more times than writing this book.
Yeah.
I literally, when I first pitched the book, I met with a bunch of agents in New York City. I flew in and I met with everybody. And the book at that point was 50 Things Before I'm 50. That's it, just the 50 things. And everybody told me that's not a book. If it was 50 things every woman should do, that's a book. But that's not, my book is my 50 things. And they said, if you want people to care about these 50 particular things, they have to care about you first. And the book has to start with your divorce. And I was like, absolutely, 100%. This will never happen. Except obviously, it did. But yes, it was very challenging. In fact, I wrote one of the chapters in my therapist's office, crying the whole time because I was like, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. I will not do this. I was like Sam I Am with the green eggs and ham. I will not eat them. And she was like, well, do you think it would help you if we did it together? And I was like, yes, fine. I will do that. And parts of the book, like you said, was it very hard? Yes, I used to sit in my room and write until I was almost certain I was going to throw up. And then I would lie on the floor for a while. And at one point, one of my friends was like, I don't think this project is a good idea. You're so upset. It's really triggering you. You're reliving trauma. She said, I think you should quit. And I really listened to her and I thought about it. And I did stop and think, like, is it just making it worse for me? But there's something about healing and trauma and therapy. The really only way out is through. And did it suck? Yes. Am I thrilled to be on this side? 1,000,000%. Like for me, I wrote a lot of the book during COVID when I was home and I couldn't travel. I don't know that I ever would have continued if I had had the option. Like if someone had said to me, "Oh, do you want to work on chapter 4 or do you want to go with us scuba diving in Bonaire?" I'd be like, "Peace out, book over." But it was COVID and the global pandemic. I'm never going to say I'm so glad, but it was a choice I made to keep writing when I wasn't traveling. I took about 8 classes at UCLA around the same time. I took a lot of film classes and writing classes. I took a meditation class, and that helped keep me grounded and going. That I was like, okay. I remember I was in a screenwriting class and they were talking about, sometimes when you're with your film, bad things happen to your protagonist. And it's not nice. You like your protagonist, but you have to make something bad happen to them for the story to keep going. It's second act. And I kept thinking, I'm the protagonist. Bad things happen to me. I don't want to write about them, but I kept trying to have this like close, far view of I wasn't making it up. One of the things my agent said to me when he agreed to sign with me, and Chip was really such a big supporter of this book, he said, most travel books, there's inconveniences, someone misses the plane or the hotel's bankrupt. He's like, in your story, really bad things happen. He's like, he said, and you are still funny. Like you're, it's not a book about blaming.
Mm-hmm. No, agreed. You definitely have a nice mix in there for the bad stuff is there for sure, but there are a lot of witty aspects as well. It was a fun read. I want to talk about your podcast now. Make your own map. So it's been nominated for awards. So can you tell me about the podcast itself and what made you decide to start that?
So the funny thing about my podcast is when there was a moment in publishing the book, working on the website, since I'm divorced, you've now met the whole team basically. So I have the ability to get stuff done quickly. And so choosing to be a traditionally published author, I have an agent, I have an editor, there's the publishing house, there was the book cover designer, there's a lot of people involved in the project. And the timeline, anyone who works with the publishing house will tell you, is maybe not at the pace that you would think it could be if you did it by yourself, which is why a lot of people choose self-publishing for a lot of reasons. I wanted to be traditionally published. I signed the deal, but there was a point where I was like, I need something back that's just mine. And at the time, Spotify was sending out these messages. Do you want to be a video podcaster? I was like, what even is that? Those words don't go together. And so I started doing research about video podcasting, and I was on someone else's show, and theirs was more for TV, not a podcast. And I said to the guy who was like, millions of awards, worked in TV for years, I'm like, I don't even understand. What does that mean? What is a video podcast? He's like, it's just a movie, Lisa. It's just words and people. What's so confusing? And I was like, well, I'm good at movies. I make movies for YouTube all the time. I'm a YouTuber. He was like, so be a podcaster. And I was like, okay. And literally I started. And my same theory, right? I told you, how did I start my blog?
Right.
Free and no password. And so Spotify podcasting, free. It was at the time through Anchor. Spotify later bought them, and now it's
Anchor at one point as well. Yes.
Yeah. So Anchor was free, like a lot of the podcasting programs, as you probably know. Some of them, there's a fee. And I mean, sometimes it's great to pay a fee because then they help you make money with advertising. But my theory is start with free. And in fairness, not everybody had gotten on the video bandwagon. I think it was just Spotify in the beginning. And so I started. And I was fortunate that I got some amazing interviews. Deepak Chopra's publicist actually pitched me.
Wow.
So I was like, I thought it was one of my friends. I was like, is this a real person? Who's offering me an interview with Deepak Chopra? That's ridiculous. So I like talking to people. I'd always made videos. I film on Zoom, which is also basically free. I was very low level to start. Like, how can we make this work? And I've gotten to interview a lot of my travel friends, and I was able to interview the ambassador of Ireland, which I got invited to an event in LA. I had just been in Ireland, and I got invited to an event in LA, and I wasn't really sure what the event was. And I wrote to the team and I'm like, if I'm going to come, would it be possible? Can I interview the ambassador? Fully expecting them to say no, because that's the thing about me. I don't count rejections. How many agents did I write to before Chip said yes? I don't know. I just kept going till Chip said yes. And if they had said to me, Lisa, that is so ridiculous, you're not interviewing the ambassador, I would have been like, okay, see you at the event. They're like, well, how would it work? I'm like, how would it work? I don't know. How do you think it should work? How about 20 minutes in person, video and audio? And they're like, how about no? I'm like, okay. And so we negotiated, and then like, we need to see the questions. Okay. Here's the questions. And they were all like, oh, these are actually very good questions. I was like, is that a yes? So it's just kind of, I was in Puerto Rico. I've been there filming many times for many different projects, but I was there and it was World Environment Day. And one of the doctors that works with the Cousteau Foundation, Dr. Richard Murphy, he's been with them 50 years. I was like, hey, do you think I could interview Dr. Richard Murphy? And they're like, oh no, he's very busy. I'm like, why don't you just ask him? He was like, wow, Lisa, you want to interview me? I'm like, yes.
Has there been anyone that you've interviewed where you just come like really starstruck that I can't believe I'm speaking to this person?
Well, Deepak Chopra, the
Yes,
ambassador.
yes.
I got to interview Andrew McCarthy. That was really fun. So I speak in the travel and adventure show circuit, and I've been able to interview some of my travel icons, Samantha Brown, Patricia
That's
Schultz
awesome.
from A Thousand Places to See Before You Die, Pauline Fromer from Fromer Travel Guides, Andrew McCarthy. That was so fun because his book had just come out, Walking with Sam. And I love interviewing people. I think it's so interesting that one of the funniest things about it is I had heard this in a workshop, actually at a conference, that people that won't answer your email, you invite them to be on your podcast and they're like, oh yeah, I'll spend 40 minutes with you. And you're like, it's such a weird podcasting. I don't know. You said you have multiple podcasts. I don't know if you had that experience also where you're just like, they said yes.
I I've interviewed a lot of celebrities also, and I'm always, first of all, I'm always amazed anyone says yes. I'm always like they say, like, I've interviewed Tommy Chong or Paul Williams, and it's mind-boggling to me, like you said, that wow, I'm talking to this person, and you try not to gush over it. So well there. So yeah, it's been like that for a while. Well, now I have to ask the other coin, on the other side of the coin. So no names. We no definitely no names, and I can tell you off the air. But has there been some people that you've interviewed where, like, after a couple of minutes, you're like, say, "Oh, how much longer of this do we have?"
Well, fortunately, not too often, because you have to remember, I worked on a cruise ship for a long, long time. And so one of my skills is they say, I could sell ice to the people that live live in the Iceland, they only have ice. But there are times when I think, what am I going to ask next? And one of the things that I've committed to with the podcast is, who cares how long it is? Like, I generally film 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how it's going, but sometimes I don't. And, I do try really hard to really prepare and have enough questions, but some people are more challenging. I'm always amazed. People say to me, Lisa, you forget it's easy for you to be on camera. I don't want to look at myself. And because I've worked with people at different conferences. I spoke in Mexico at the Women's Travel Fest, and we were talking about getting started in video and PR and books. And I said to someone, just start, just film yourself. Oh, I can't talk on camera. I'm like, well, I'll film you. Oh no, that'd be worse. So, it's interesting how some people, I have a friend who I wanted to interview on my podcast, and he's brilliant. He was like, oh no, you can't interview me. I have nothing to say. I'm like, I've heard you give keynotes 3 different times at 3 different conferences, and you're amazing. Nope, I won't do it. And I was like, okay, let it go.
Well, your podcast was nominated for awards. What's that like for you, to be recognized like that?
Thank you. Yes, I actually won 3 awards for my podcast.
Amazing.
And Samantha Brown, thank you. I think Samantha Brown was one of them. I've been nominated for a bunch, but I feel so honored. And the funny thing is, because press club, so my nominations have been against, the competition is ridiculous. Once I was up for podcast host and I was like, I'm a finalist. And then I looked at the list and I was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't vote for me. Look at this list. Like, I'm like, these are the people like who, anyway. So I feel like it's an honor to be nominated. One of the very first times I was on a list, I was number 99 on the top 100 travel blogger list. This was so long ago. It was, I can't remember the name of the list. I can picture the guy that ran the list. He had red hair. Anyway, he did the list himself. It was so long ago. It was very arduous how he counted everything. And I said, my dad, who says, she was so excited she got 100 views. I was like, I'm 99. And my dad said, how do you think the person who's 101 feels?
Exactly right.
I said, I'm 99. So
I want to go back now. Before we started recording, you and I started talking about, Jewish things right now. So I want to discuss that for a little bit. So, I see your social media posts, and Jewish issues seem to be very important to you. So just how did October 7th affect you personally? How did it get you on that day?
oh my God, what a ongoing horrific tragedy, trauma. I feel like the whole world changed on October 7th. That, I've always known that people don't like us as Jews. I just feel like since October 7th and all the anti-Semitism on campus and everything that's happened, my feeling has been, I didn't realize it was so many people, and I didn't realize they hated us this much. And I had heard another Jewish journalist speak a few years ago, and she said when she was on TV, she was in broadcast every Friday, she said Shabbat Shalom, and not much else. And it struck me that that was important. And over the years, when it worked, because I didn't always post every day and I didn't always post on Shabbat, but I would say Shabbat Shalom and then the rest of whatever my message was. So since October 7th, I have posted every Shabbat, either Friday or Saturday, with something about what's been going on and the hostages and my heartbreaking. And my temple, we've been very active. Every Friday night service, we read 10 names of the hostages and sing a particular song that was commissioned about bring them home. So I've been collating things from other smarter people, Stand With Us, World Jewish Council, AIPAC, different organizations that all day long, all week long, that's all they're doing is looking out for us as Jews and trying to figure out, like, what do we do next? And it's been amazing in the weirdest way. I feel like, it was the very beginning of my book tour when October 7th happened. My book came out September 19th, in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur last year. And it's really impacted me. And, there's been different times where, it's been advised by the State Department or other people, don't wear Jewish jewelry, do wear Jewish jewelry, wear a number, don't wear a number. How do you interact in the world? And I've been fascinated, the people that have come at me, like, you're not posting enough. I'm like, okay, your opinion, I respect it. And then I had another person say to me, Lisa, you're on book tour, stop posting about the Jews. And so it's so fascinating. Everybody has an opinion, but mostly, since they executed the 6 hostages, obviously my heart, which I didn't think could break anymore, is shattered again. And I remember hearing from early on, I think it was Golda Meir who initially said, it's very hard to negotiate with people that only want you dead. And the people that are a ceasefire now, I'm like, you know what? On October 6th, there was a ceasefire. And early on, I mean, it's very different now. It's been almost a year, but early on in October, November, I was like, listen, you want a ceasefire? No problem. Give us the people back. Like, you hate us. You're going to come for us again. Give us back the children. Who takes children?
I'm of the same mindset as you with that. Well, no, so you travel a lot. Are there places as a Jewish traveler where you felt that this has been inhospitable that for me to go to?
It's something that's very on my mind all the time. Before October 7th, the question I got asked a lot was, is it solo women travel? Can you speak to safety of women in travel? And in fairness, my personal belief is it's completely the wrong question, because I was not safe traveling from someone who supposedly cherished me. And women, when they're home, I don't know any woman that doesn't have a story about being nervous in a parking garage and like putting their keys through their fingers like that was going to help, or getting off an elevator because the guy looked a little bit odd. So are women safe traveling? I mean, I think our antennae are normally amazing because we're unfortunately skilled. So now I've always traveled as a Jewish woman, a Jewish American woman. And like I said earlier, I'm very grateful to travel on a passport that has, for the most part, felt like it gave me a lot of security. Am I aware all the time that I'm traveling somewhere else Jewish? Yes. And because airlines and tourism boards and hotels do look up their guests now. So there isn't anybody where I'm walking in that can't look at my feed and know that I'm definitely Jewish. Early on, when I was traveling, like in 2008, there were a lot of issues with what was going on in the world. And there was a time that backpackers, we were sewing Canada patches on their bags and pretending to be from Canada, not the US. And, there have been times where I've been on a trip and people are like, oh, you're Jewish? So, it's like, do you pass? Can you pass? Should you pass? Like, what makes you feel safer? But I do think about it. I am aware that it is not always safe, and I think about my choices.
And you just mentioned social media. That always seems to be the question: how much do you post? And there was, especially I hear Jewish friends and other Jewish writers say that all the time, that they're worried about things like that. Posting too much or certain things. And I was always told at one point, keep it down, and God forbid you post about Israel. So it's now after that, all my things have changed. I don't care. Like, I'm going to be as in your face as possible. That ship has sailed now.
I completely agree.
Right. So that's it. To me, it's like, if you're not speaking up now, what are you waiting for? This is it right now. So yeah, let's go back to your travel thing. So let's talk about your YouTube channel. You mentioned it. I was on your YouTube channel yesterday. What type of things for people to know? What can we find on any content if people want to come to your YouTube channel?
So the YouTube channel, it's funny the way things have evolved so rapidly since TikTok. So TikTok was actually part of my book journey, that my agent told me I had to join TikTok. And I was like, I am too old for TikTok. And I'm a YouTuber. So to have to change from horizontal to vertical was something I was completely disinterested in. But it happened during COVID that was the suggestion. And he was my agent. So I did it. And it really revitalized my YouTube channel for a variety of reasons. Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube were fighting against TikTok for market share. So they all invented, Facebook and Instagram have Reels, and YouTube has Shorts. So I never thought that I would like filming vertically. It's actually been really fun. And I did this TikTok project when I first joined. You were supposed to do 5 videos a day for 30 days. And I ended up doing 90 days. And I didn't think I was that interesting. It was a real challenge to post that much. But at the end of that 90 days was when I got a book deal.
Wow.
So I do think that all that stuff matters. You don't want it to matter. But so on, you asked what's on the content. So I'm just back from being in Canada. I wasn't pretending to be Canadian this time. And I went on a walking safari with Churchill Wild to see the polar bears.
I saw your pictures on social media. Those are fantastic. Yes.
So there's lots of videos of my trips. And because I've spent this last year doing the book tour, there's lots of videos from, different events. And like you said, I have the podcast. So YouTube also now supports podcasts.
Mhm.
So my podcast is on everything. I'm sure like yours, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple, Amazon, blah, 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 but also YouTube.
Same, same. So you do a lot of travel writing and freelance writing. There are a lot of people who looking to get into that. I've always wanted to do travel writing. So what advice would you give to people looking to get in?
So my advice is do it. I always tell people start small and start for free. So I live in Los Angeles. And so if I were just starting out, I would write about recently my college roommate was in town and we went to the Getty Museum. We went to the Getty Center. There's 2 Gettys in Los Angeles, and that would be my story. I had lunch with, it's actually a story I need to write. I had lunch and we went to the pool at the Lux Sunset Hotel, and then we went to the Getty, and I made the reel already, but I haven't made the article. So that's literally one of my travel articles. It's coming soon. But because I get asked this question all the time, I started a class. I don't know if you're familiar with Udemy, like Academy, but with a U.
Yes.
So my class is Travel Writer 101. I can send you a link and
send the link and I'll post it within the interview as well. So
okay. And so it's basic. My class is basic because a lot of the classes out there are like how to sell your article to, the top 5 publications in travel. And I think that's very overwhelming for someone that's new. So my class is writing, video, photos, social media, and networking, like how to get on a press trip. That's the ultimate thing people want to know. How can I go for free? First of all, it's not free. We're all working, but whatever. That's different. Yes. That's a completely different podcast. But what I consider my class is just like if you're, when you go to a party and it's just appetizers, you're like, oh, I'll have one of those and I'll have one of those. There's no real main course. You decide like which thing do you want to learn more about? I'll tell you who does that really well. But people, I don't think have an idea at this point in 2024, the vast scope of being a content creator. I don't even know what to call myself anymore. People are like, are you a journalist? Are you an author? You're a podcast host? You do YouTube videos? You're a TV host? I'm like, you stop me anytime. Oh yeah, social media. So
that sounds fun. Do it a little bit of all. Yes.
You have to do everything. Right. I was at a magazine conference and one of the editors said to the writers in the room, I am going to be looking at your social media. If you're not posting about the articles that you get published and you're not making videos, I'm not going to work with you. And everybody in the room like went, started to cry. And I was like, yes, I'm so excited.
Well, that is true. I was an agent for a while, and I would always check out before I took on anyone, someone's social media to see, not just for seeing how much they posted, if they were like engaged also. I also want to see if they posted things that I don't want to have to defend later on. So,
right,
so
like,
yeah.
Totally. I look at other people's social media when I'm on a trip and I'm like, that has a spelling mistake.
Right.
Like, good for you for doing it quickly, but how about doing it properly? Right. Like a lot of times I don't post. I normally don't post when I'm in the middle. With the polar bears, I did because it's a short season and there's only 8,000 people on the planet that have walked with polar bears. So I thought people might be interested. But mostly I'm pretty slow at getting this stuff out, but I think it's worth it. But I like you, I'll look at something. I remember someone posted, it was on Facebook. I might have even before there was Instagram, who knows, but they posted about how terrible it was. They were somewhere on another continent and they had jet lag. And I was like, please stop this. We don't complain about jet lag on social media. You're a travel journalist. I'm yes. Like, please let me be your teacher. I need to coach you. No.
Well, on the same thing, what travel tips would you give someone?
Oh, So oddly enough, my travel tips do not include carry-on only. I do not believe in that. I know that's a big thing. Everyone's like carry-on only. I travel with a hula hoop. So
Wow.
I can't check my luggage and I don't want to. One of my biggest tips is get the airline credit card and get the miles, save the miles and take, it's a theme, the free trip. And let the airline work for you. You board earlier. Your first check bag is free. They give you the miles. Like, what's the problem here? So, I mean, if you're trying to buy a house and you're trying to get a mortgage, it's not a good idea to open a lot of credit cards. But aside from that, there's really not a lot of downside. And I think it makes a difference. I like to pick my seat. I like to check my bag. It makes me happier. And traveling can be really challenging.
Yeah.
So I think if whatever can help you, I also tell people I bring snacks. Like, I don't want to be curious, what are they serving or not serving on the plane? My last flight, they had turbulence. They didn't even serve drinks.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I need a drink, but I need a snack. And so I bring snacks. I use a credit card. Let me think. I check my luggage. Another good tip. Oh, I book some of my air trips on miles. And oh, if you love cruises, one of the things I recommend is Vacations to Go website. They often have very good deals. And for flights, I use this site called kiwi.com, like the fruit.
Okay.
And sometimes when you look on there, it shows you routing that's different than you might find anywhere else because they have an international focus that you can use them for domestic. But sometimes I'm like, how am I going to make this work? And I look on there and I'm like, oh, that is a good way.
That's a good tip for people traveling on a budget.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you get asked this all the time, but I have to ask here the same. First, let's start your best travel experience in the place that you were at.
My best travel experience?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of my most favorite things to do, we started with this, was scuba diving. And one of my best experiences was in Sipadan. I was in this place called Barracuda Point, and we were literally underwater with this tornado of barracudas. There were just thousands of them.
Wow.
That was incredible. The only other time I've seen so many creatures in one place like that was recently with the polar bears. We had 2 days out on the water and we saw beluga whales, and I never seen them in my life. And there were 1,000 of them, and they're literally like a shocking white color. And they're the only, I can't remember, they're the only whale that can articulate its head. So they look like they're looking at you because they are. And then they sing. They call them the canaries of the sea. So we had a hydrophone in the water so we could hear them.
Well, I want to, as a travel person, you probably shouldn't mention the worst. I mean, besides the one in the book. I mean, you shouldn't mention the worst because you don't want to, ruin that for the future. But
I think as far as worst, I think I have a tip for people.
Mhm.
So as far as the worst, one of the tips I give when we talked about that, I speak at the Travel and Adventure Show. One of the things I always say is to use the travel F word, which of course is flexible.
Right, yes.
Of course, you were thinking that flexible, that your own attitude makes the difference if it's a travel disaster or not. Like when your plane is canceled because the plane needs maintenance, that is an inconvenience. And that is not happening to you. It's like the global pandemic. It just happened to all of us. And so I think if everybody can just take it down a notch. There are times, like we talked earlier about October 7th, I do think that happened to us. That's different. That's a true trauma, true tragedy. Your plane being delayed, not so much. Go get a snack and relax. So most of
Don't
the
take it
time,
out of the airplane crew.
don't take it. Yeah, absolutely not, because then you're on the no-fly list, and that's a tragedy. But I think that people forget, like sometimes it doesn't work out. Like you get to your hotel and for whatever reason, something happens. If you stay calm and you stay kind and you say to the hotel team, hey, that isn't what I thought was going to happen today, they'll say, maybe we can help you out.
Attitude is a lot. Yeah. I agree. So what are you working on next?
What am I working on next? Well, I am excited because I'm going back to Ireland. I'm going to be filming for the Jet Set TV.
Wow.
And you're finding me today. I'm in Park City, Utah. And I am going to hike tomorrow at Deer Valley. And I'm so excited to be working on a story with them because Deer Valley is undergoing an enormous expansion. They're basically tripling in size. And the skiing terrain, I got to ski some of it this last season near it. I didn't ski on it just yet, but it's amazing.
And how can people follow you on social media?
On social media, it's my name, Lisa Niver, and Niver rhymes with diver, Niver.
On all platforms?
On all platforms, I'm Lisa Niver. And then, like you said, I have the YouTube channel. I have a website, lisaniver.com. And then my bigger travel website is wesaidgotravel.com.
Lisa, I want to thank you again for coming on. It's been so much fun getting to speak with you. I've been admiring all your book's fantastic. I've been admiring all your social media things and all your pictures. And again, just thank you.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. And I know that I have in my heart, and I'm sure you do too, that we will dance again.
Yes.
And we're strong survivor style people.
Well, again, the memoir is Brave-ish. The podcast is Make Your Own Map. And this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. And again, a very special thanks to Lisa Niver. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.